They told me it was just a form, something simple, routine, harmless. Just your signature, Mom, my eldest son said, sliding the papers across the table. It's just for emergency planning, that's all. I was holding a warm mug of tea. It was chamomile, he remembered, that was my favorite. My hands shook a little, but not because of the tea. Because something inside me already knew. This wasn't just paper. But when your child looks you in the eye and says, "Trust me," you don't argue. You sign. And that was the day I signed away everything. I had always trusted James. He was the responsible one, the one who stayed local, the one who said he'd take care of me after my husband passed. I didn't need much, just a little help sorting through bills and managing the house. I never expected to give up control. But that's exactly what happened the moment my signature hit that line. He patted my hand like I was some forgetful old lady. "You're all set, Mom. Don't worry about a thing." And for a moment, I believed him. The cable bill was in his name, then the house insurance, then the bank account. "I'm just consolidating things for simplicity," he said with a tight smile. "You don't need to worry about all the paperwork anymore." It sounded reasonable. It always sounded reasonable, until the locks on the front door were changed, and my name disappeared from the deed. It was a Tuesday afternoon. I had gone to the local pharmacy to pick up my prescription one I'd been getting filled there for 20 years. But when I got to the counter, the woman gave me a strange look. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Hale, but your insurance no longer covers this location." "My insurance?" "Yes," she said. "Your policy was canceled last month. It looks like your son signed you over to a managed account." That was the moment it hit me like a cold wind to the chest. I wasn't managing anything anymore. Someone else was managing me. I stood outside my own house that evening, prescription in hand, staring at the front door. Something was different. It wasn't just the silence behind the windows or the fact that the porch light wasn't on. It was the lock. It blinked red when I tried my key. A new smart lock. One I hadn't approved. One I hadn't paid for. I knocked. No answer. I called James. He didn't pick up. I texted, "Why can't I get into the house? What happened to the insurance? What did I sign?" The read receipts showed he'd seen the messages. But the only reply I got that night was silence. The next morning, I finally got a call not from James, but from a woman with a soft voice. "Mrs. Hale," she said, "I'm the new case manager assigned to your estate." My what?" She paused like I should already know. "Your son transferred power of attorney to himself. It's all been finalized. He's listed you under long-term care arrangements." "Long-term care," I said, stunned. "I'm not in any care. I'm standing in front of my house. I'm afraid you no longer have legal residency there. Everything I thought I owned, my home, my car, even my identity, was now his to control." They hadn't even sent me a copy of the documents. When I asked the case manager for more information, she replied, "You signed consent, Mrs. Hale. We're just following the legal agreement." Legal. That word hit me like a brick. It meant they could strip me of everything, and it would still be correct. It wasn't losing my living room, my garden, my bed of 30 years. It was the look on my grandson's face the next Sunday at church. He whispered, "Grandma, why don't you live with us anymore?" I smiled, not wanting him to carry my pain. But deep down, I realized something horrifying. My family hadn't just stolen my house. They'd rewritten my story. They'd cast me as a burden, as someone incapable, as someone to be managed. I spent the next few days in a daze, sleeping on my friend Marlene's couch, my suitcase propped against her hallway wall like a reminder, "You don't live anywhere now." Marlene wanted to help, but she was 76 herself, with bad knees and a pension that barely covered groceries. "I can't keep you long, honey," she said gently. "But you're not alone here. Not alone, but not at home either." That night, I sat on her balcony with an old composition notebook and a cheap ballpoint pen. And for the first time in my life, I wrote like a woman who had nothing left to lose. The next morning, I went to the county clerk's office. It was a gray building, bland and bureaucratic. But behind that glass window and bulletproof filing cabinet, I found something James never thought I'd read. The documents, the ones I supposedly signed willingly. Except they were filled with legal jargon I'd never understood. They were signed during a week I was recovering from medication that made me dizzy and disoriented. One form had my name spelled wrong. Another listed me as having dementia-like symptoms. I asked the clerk quietly, "Is this what they used to take my house?" She nodded. "If you didn't have legal representation when you signed, then yes." A younger man, maybe mid-30s, sat beside me in the waiting room afterward. He noticed my tears. "You all right, ma'am?" "I think I've been tricked out of my life," I whispered. He paused, thoughtful. "My mom went through something similar. She found a lawyer through the Senior Justice Center downtown. It helped her get her house back." My heart jumped. I wrote it down in shaky cursive, Senior Justice Center. Her name was Vanessa. an attorney who looked more like a television star than a legal aid worker. But when she heard my story, she didn't blink. "We've seen this before," she said. "They exploit trust, use confusion, weaponize paperwork." "Can I fight it?" I asked. Vanessa smiled. "If you're ready to tell the truth and tell it loud, then yes." I sat back in my chair and for the first time since I lost my keys, felt something return. My voice. And I planned to use it. I didn't expect him to show up. But James walked into the mediation room like he owned it, like he always had. Hair slicked back, wearing the suit I bought him for his first job interview 20 years ago. He smiled politely at the attorney, then turned to me with something between pity and calculation. "Mom," he nodded. "We're here to sort this out, right?" Sort this out, as if my life was a drawer full of mismatched socks and not the ruins of a home stolen through ink and manipulation. I didn't ask how he was. I didn't offer coffee. I didn't play the polite mother anymore. I asked, "Why did you do it?" He sighed. "You were getting older. You didn't understand the paperwork anyway. And we needed security." You mean you needed money and you thought I was too old to stop you?" His silence confirmed everything. Vanessa leaned forward, calm but sharp. "Mr. Colburn, your mother's cognitive evaluations from the month in question show no signs of dementia. Yet in the legal forms you submitted, you claimed she had declining mental faculties." James fidgeted. He hadn't expected we'd come armed with facts, receipts, dates, doctor's notes. "I gave you my life," I said softly. "My home, my trust, my recipes. And you gave me a locked door." James looked away. "I washed your clothes after Little League. I stayed up late helping with science fair posters. I paid for your braces with night shifts. And you," my voice cracked, "you turned me into a burden with a signature." The room was silent. Even Vanessa sat still, like the air itself was listening. He said nothing, so I stood. I turned to the judge and said, "I want what's mine returned. But I also want this documented. I want this recorded." So no other mother, no other elder, gets erased behind a smile. My hands trembled, but my voice, it did not. The courtroom wasn't loud, it was cold. Not in temperature, but in truth, because that day everything was laid bare in black and white. The documents James submitted had red flags, forged medical statements, backdated signatures, witnesses who were never even there. Vanessa, my lawyer, laid it out like a quiet storm. No shouting, just fact after fact that cracked the image James had crafted of himself as the concerned son. The judge asked kindly. She was a woman maybe in her 60s, not unlike me. She looked at me not with pity, but with knowing. And I said, because mothers always hope their children will come back. We wait, we forgive. Until one day we're waiting in a basement while they spend our retirement. Her eyes didn't blink, she just nodded. The ruling came in my favor. My name would be restored to the deed. The assets he'd liquidated had to be accounted for. But what about the loss of birthdays together? The trust broken like a family heirloom dropped during a move. There was no ruling for that. No dollar amount could patch that hole. Still, I stood again. That's what I told the reporters outside the courtroom. Because yes, they came. A local news station picked up my story. Then a podcast. Then a national piece on elder fraud. I didn't hide. I wanted the world to know. This doesn't just happen in broken families. It happens in nice homes, in Sunday churches, in dinner tables where the dessert is silence. He thought power came from taking, but real power comes from rising, from saying no more, from turning shame into fuel, from letting truth echo louder than betrayal. That was the day I stopped whispering in the kitchen and started speaking from the podium. It started small, just me and a stack of photocopied flyers in the church hallway. A headline, "Do you know who controls your finances?" Underneath a picture of me, not glamorous, not polished, just real. I didn't plan to start a movement. I only wanted to warn others. But sometimes one voice is all it takes for others to realize they still have one. They came to me after Sunday service, at first quietly. A woman in her 70s whispered, "My daughter has my debit card. I haven't bought myself a new pair of shoes in 3 years. Another, I signed something for my grandson. Now he owns my house. He says he'll give it back one day." Each story, a different shade of the same betrayal. And each one ended the same way I didn't think anyone would believe me. We gathered in my living room. 10 women, 12 cups of tea, 22 stories of silence, heartbreak, and strength. I called it the No More Basement Circle because none of us were going to live in anyone's shadows again. We didn't sit there to cry. We sat there to plan. Local officials noticed. A state senator asked me to speak on elder abuse prevention. I walked into that marble building in my Sunday shoes, not fancy, but firm, and told them everything. The room got quiet, not out of pity, out of respect. And for once, I wasn't introduced as just someone's mother. I was introduced by my name. He saw my face on TV. He heard my voice on the radio. He probably thought I'd fade away when the court ruled. He didn't know I'd become louder. I never saw remorse in his eyes, only regret that his plan didn't work. But I wasn't looking for his apology anymore. I wasn't living in that waiting room of hope. I had moved on. The media called me the grandma who fought back. The church called me Sister Strength. But to me, I was just someone who'd had enough. My story went viral, shared on Facebook, stitched on TikTok, and discussed in community groups across the country. Emails poured in from places I'd never even heard of. Women said you gave me the courage to speak. I thought I was the only one. I'm not going to be silent anymore. One morning, a college student came to interview me for her senior thesis on elder rights. She said, "Your story will help me change the world." And I told her gently, "No, dear, our stories will." The front porch that once felt like exile now became the stage where women like me told their truths to the world. I didn't get my house back, not the way it used to be. But I built something better, a shelter for older women run by older women. We called it Second Light. Because even after the darkest betrayal, there is always light that follows. I put my settlement money into that house. The same hands that were tricked into signing a lie now signed a deed of hope. Months later, my son came by, not to apologize, but to ask if I could help him. Because he had lost everything. I looked him in the eyes and said, "I already helped you. I gave you life." Then I turned and walked back into my house, where love lived, not manipulation, where dignity thrived, not silence. Maybe you've been betrayed. Maybe someone told you your voice doesn't matter anymore. Let me tell you this. You still matter. Your voice, your wisdom, your truth. They're not expired. They're powerful. Because I was once a woman forgotten in a basement, and now I'm the one building rooms full of light. They say trauma can break you or build you. I chose to let it build me brick by brick with the truth as my foundation. I began speaking at local churches, women's shelters, and even high schools. At first, I was nervous. My voice trembled. My hands shook. But then I looked into the crowd and saw the faces of women who needed to hear that healing was possible at any age. We called ourselves the Basement Club, not because we lived there anymore, but because we all knew what it felt like to be buried while still breathing. It was a place where every story was honored. Every scar was sacred. Every woman had a seat at the table. We didn't just share pain, we shared blueprints for freedom. One quiet morning, a news van pulled up to our shelter. A young reporter asked, "How did you go from being forgotten to being the woman everyone wants to hear?" I smiled and said I stopped waiting to be rescued and started rescuing others. That clip went viral, and for the first time in decades, my phone didn't ring with demands. It rang with invitations. He came back again, this time different. Tired, defeated, eyes not filled with entitlement, but something else. "Mom," he said quietly, "I think I understand now. I'm sorry." And do you know what I did? I didn't yell, I didn't cry. I opened the door, stepped outside, and whispered, "Some wounds forgive slowly, but you can start by respecting my light." He nodded, and for the first time in years, we sat in silence, peaceful, not painful. Today, I'm not a victim. I'm a voice, a visionary, and yes, a very stubborn, very proud grandma who refused to be erased. They may have stolen my papers, my house, my peace, but they couldn't steal my spirit. And if you're watching this, maybe it's time you stopped hiding yours too. Because some of the strongest revolutions start in basements. When I received the invitation, I thought it was a mistake. A national summit on elder justice and women's rights, me. But the letter had my name on it. The woman they once trapped in silence was now being asked to speak into a microphone that could change laws. I packed my old brown bag, wore my best thrift store dress, and walked into that convention hall not as a victim, but as a survivor with receipts. My voice cracked at first. I was tricked into signing away my life. I said, and for too long, I believed it was my fault. I paused. But now I know it was never my fault. It was their manipulation, their greed, their belief that old women are disposable. People were crying. Even the toughest-looking men were blinking fast. When I finished, they stood. Not out of politeness, but because they saw themselves, their mothers, their grandmothers, in me. After the summit, something strange happened. They listened. The senator pulled me aside. "You said what we've all ignored for too long." In months, a new bill was drafted, the Elder Autonomy Protection Act, a law to require third-party oversight for legal documents signed by seniors, especially in cases involving family caregivers. They called it Grandma's Law. I never thought justice would wear a name like mine. One rainy Sunday, I revisited my old house. The locks were changed again, but this time I had the key. Because I bought it back. Room by room, I transformed it into a shelter for women over 60, those discarded after a lifetime of giving. Above the front door, I carved a plaque. Not forgotten, not finished. They tricked me into giving away everything I owned. But I built something they could never own, a legacy. And if you're sitting in a room where your worth is ignored, your name forgotten, your birthday uncelebrated, let me say this, you're still here. You still matter, and your story is still being written. Let's make it unforgettable. I was sweeping the front porch of the shelter, the house that used to hold my silence, now echoing with the sound of healing women, when a young woman walked up to the gate. She looked hesitant, nervous, but something about her eyes felt familiar. "Are you the one who runs this place?" she asked. "I am," I smiled gently. "Are you looking for a place to stay?" She nodded, then held out a photograph. It was an old, faded picture of a little girl in pigtails sitting on my lap. It was taken decades ago, when I was still working at the church daycare. "That's me," she said. "You were the only one who noticed when I stopped smiling. You told me I deserved better." She told me her story. That day when I whispered she was worth love, she didn't believe it. But she remembered. And when she finally ran away from her own abusive household, the only name she could recall with warmth was mine. "You saved me," she said. "And now I want to help you save others." We stood there for a moment, two women from different generations, connected by a single act of kindness. I opened the gate, not just for her, but for every version of her still out there, lost, bruised but not broken. The house became more than shelter. It became a home of redemption. The girl from the gate, she's now the director of outreach. We call it the Key House because once keys were used to lock me out. Now we hand them out freely to those who need a second chance. They tricked me into signing away my life. But in doing so, they signed the birth certificate of my second life. A life not of obedience but of defiance. A life not of erasure but of legacy. So if you're watching this and someone made you feel like your voice is too old, your story too late, remember this. Your breath is still warm, your eyes still see, and your comeback might be the light someone else is waiting for. Now go and rewrite the ending.